Hello everybody and welcome to my final Oscar prediction video of the year where I will be taking a look at the big one, the category of Best Picture. Now, last year I talked for almost an hour about this category. I don't know if I'm going to talk so long. This year is one of the rare years where we actually have a pretty clear pick for the Best Picture frontrunner. Most years there's a little bit of a question mark, but this year I'd say, looking at statistics, you would have to be a fool to not go with the obvious frontrunner. But this year has still been a pretty interesting year for movies, so I do want to talk my way through each of the Best Picture nominees and sort of explain how we got to this point. But I'm very, very excited for the Oscars tonight, and hopefully you are too. It's a shame that it has to be on the same night as The Last of Us. Why are you doing that to me? But, yeah, without further ado, let's look at the top 10 movies that the Academy selected as Best Picture nominees of 2022. 10th most likely to win is Women Talking. So this movie had an interesting journey. It premiered at the Fall Film Festivals to very strong acclaim, and was considered one of the top Best Picture contenders for a while, but then once we started getting to the main televised awards, it started slipping its nomination count, and it became clear after a while that this movie was not the crowd pleaser that the studio was clearly hoping it would be. None of the actors got on. I think a lot of the actresses were sort of splitting votes with themselves. When it came time to the Oscar nominations, it missed score, which it seemed very likely to get. In fact, it only got 2 nominations, which is very rare in this day and age. 2 nominations, one for picture and one for screenplay. Now, that in and of itself is a pretty incredible feat, and it shows, I think, that this movie was definitely number 10, and in a sliding scale year, where there would be 8 or 9 nominees, I don't think this would make it. I think this just barely got on in the 10th slot. It's funny how this is the second year in a row of a straight 10 lineup in Best Picture, and both years it's pretty obvious what number 10 was. Last year it was Nightmare Alley, and this year it's Women Talking. So clearly the strategy for next year is look for the movie that stars Rooney Mara. That's your number 10 in Best Picture. In all seriousness, though, it's a shame that this movie isn't contending more for the win, and the fact that it's considered the frontrunner in screenplay usually would help it in Best Picture, but it's just got those 2 nominations, and I don't think it has any serious chance to win Best Picture. I think it's the clear number 10 in this race. 9th most likely to win is Avatar: The Way of Water. So, this movie has also had something of an interesting journey. It's a movie that, for a long, long time, people joked about, oh, this is never going to come out, and oh, people don't care about Avatar anymore. But don't underestimate James Cameron, because this movie was a big hit with a box office, and the audiences seem to like it a lot. Now, it's funny because the Avatar franchise, at least with the first 2 movies, seem to be following a very similar path as the Lord of the Rings franchise, whereas the first movie is this big, big hit, and it's coming really, really close to, it's in the conversation for winning Best Picture. It gets a bunch of nominations, is one of the top Oscar movies of the year, and then the second movie gets considerably less nominations, still gets the picture nomination, but misses out director, and is not considered a contender to win picture at all. And I think in both cases it's a similar narrative of, oh, we really like the movie, but we've already seen this before, and we know that there's more coming. Now, with that analogy, does that mean the last Avatar movie is going to sweep the Oscars? I don't know, a bit too early to say at this point, but I think while this movie did have a strong reaction from it, I just don't see a world. Because here's the thing, yes, it's a well-liked, money-making action blockbuster that's feel good and all that. But there is another movie like that in this category that's going to take that vote. So, for that reason, I can't imagine that this actually wins Best Picture. Like, it won at the box office, and it's going to win visual effects, and that's probably reward enough. Eighth most likely to win is Triangle of Sadness. So this nominee was something of a surprise when it happened. It got the Golden Globe nominee for comedy, but it seemed like something the Oscars probably wouldn't go for. It's made by Ruben Östlund. It's his first English language film, and I think there was a sense of, oh, is it too weird or is it too shocking for the Academy? Because there was so much word when it premiered about how shocking it was. And ultimately, the movie did seem to hit with Academy voters quite well. It's also funny, as been pointed out before, this movie came out the same year as Glass Onion and The Menu and Season 2 of The White Lotus, and all of these properties have this similar, like, eat the rich mentality to it. So it sort of makes sense that one of these properties would be nominated at the Oscars. And it's a good movie. I'm in the camp of, I really like everything that happens on the boat, but once we get to the island, it loses a lot of momentum for me, and I've heard similar feelings like that from a lot of people. So for that reason, I don't think it has a serious chance to win. I would actually say of all the Best Picture nominees, this is the only one that is definitely not winning an Academy Award in any of the categories it's nominated in. All the others might pick up an Oscar somewhere, but definitely not Triangle of Sadness. And so, while I think this is a cool nomination, it just doesn't have the path. The fact that it wasn't nominated at most of the major guilds, I don't know. This one doesn't have the press it needs. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. I think that's probably award enough for this movie. Seventh most likely to win is Elvis. Now, this movie, I have to be honest, it's a little bit surprising that it went as far as it did, because I can understand it getting nominated for Austin Butler and for a lot of the text, but the Best Picture nomination surprises me. This is a good movie, it's an above-average biopic, but nothing about it really screams Best Picture to me. To the point where I can almost see a world where this won every single award it was nominated for except Picture. I mean, it's an above-average biopic, as I said, but what is it saying? Like, it's not really saying anything new. This is like the same generic biopic story we've seen with a little bit of a different edge to it, but I just don't think there's any particular reason why voters would want to vote for this in Best Picture, considering the type of film it is. People who love the film will vote for Austin Butler and will vote for the text, and those are the aspects that should be rewarded, but I don't know if everything comes together in a way that it should win. I mean, a lot of people on film Twitter seem to be under the impression this is the weakest nominee in the category. I don't know if I'd say that personally, but I just can't imagine this movie having the passion it would need to actually win Best Picture. This is something that just got carried along because of love for the performance and the text. Sixth most likely to win is Tar. Now, this is an interesting example because, unlike Elvis, this is a movie that film Twitter loves. It's a very, very artistic film. It's something of a slow burn, but it is a very effective film about cancel culture, and it's all anchored by this very strong performance by Cate Blanchett. Now, the movie honestly has done a lot better with nominations than I thought it would. Picture, director, actress, screenplay, editing, and cinematography. The editing nomination, in particular, shows that this movie has a lot of support behind it, because it's subtle work. And I think that there are a lot of people who really, really do love this movie, and this is the kind of movie that impacts the brain more so than the heart. And historically, that's not the kind of movie that tends to win Academy Awards. it's a little bit on the colder side, more on the slower side, and so while I get that this movie is certainly well respected and it has won some critics awards for Best Picture, I just don't see the Academy really going for it in terms of a win. Maybe if it had won like an important televised award in Alita, then maybe. But I don't know. This doesn't feel like it would be an audience crowd pleaser based on the type of film that it is. Great film, well executed, but I just don't think it's for everybody, and the Academy tends to award movies that are for everybody. Fifth most likely to win is Top Gun Maverick. Well, speaking of movies that are for everybody, this was the ultimate dad movie of the year. It made so much money. It was sort of considered the movie that saved the theater industry because it's been so long since a movie like stayed at number one at the box office for months at a time, which is what this movie really did. And that's pretty impressive in and of itself. I've certainly had my issues with the fact that it was winning all this stuff and the fact that it was considered a contender in Best Picture. Um, Ultimately, I'm okay with it. This is a good movie. It's a fine dad movie, although I will say, for the record, my dad is not a very big fan of this movie. He was actually quite upset that 13 Lives was not nominated for any Oscars this year. I had to remember the name for a second. But that was the movie he wants to see rewarded. And I will say, there was a point in time when I actually started to wonder if this could be a real threat to win Best Picture. Especially when it got that surprise screenplay nomination. I did not see that one coming. So I started to wonder, does this have the support it needs? Because it's a fun, feel-good crowd pleaser that has a narrative behind it. It's the film that got people back to the theaters. And I was sort of looking at PGA, and to a lesser extent the Golden Globe for Drama, thinking that if this was going to have a real threat at winning picture, it would have to win one of those. But ultimately, it didn't. And so I think while this is a movie that a lot of people really respond to, ultimately, it is still a sequel, it is still a franchise movie, it is still an action movie. All those things do count against it, and if it had one significant win other than NBR, I might be willing to consider it. But as it stands, I don't think this can go all the way. Like Avatar, I think the box office is the reward for this one, and it may have to settle for a below-the-line award. If it was nominated for cinematography, it would definitely win that, but yeah, I think certain Academy voters are hesitant to give a movie like this Best Picture, even if it is a crowd pleaser. So, sorry, Top Gun. Your kind is doomed for extinction. Maybe so, sir, but not today. Fourth most likely to win is The Fabelmans. Now, this is a movie that really seems like an Oscar frontrunner on paper. It's coming from a legendary director who's telling a semi-autobiographical story about growing up with a love for movies. It won the Audience Award at TIFF, and when that happened, Film Twitter instantly declared it the frontrunner and said there was no way any movie could beat it, even though it's only October. And oh my god, guys, I'm so sorry. I just realized I was looking at the notes I wrote for last year for the movie Belfast. So, sorry, my mistake. The Fabelmans. So this movie is from a legendary director telling a semi-autobiographical story about growing up with a love for movies. It won the Audience Award at TIFF, during which point it was declared the frontrunner, and Film Twitter said Best Picture is over, even though it was only October. Yeah. I gotta tell you, when this was happening, when this movie won the Audience Award and people said it's definitely winning Best Picture now, I was like, guys, why are you falling for this a second time? We just did this story last year, but somehow people fell for it. And to be fair to The Fabelmans, it does have one very important thing that Belfast didn't, and that is it won the Golden Globe for Best Picture Drama. And a lot of people did declare the race over after that, but BAFTA really did not go for this film. They They only nominated the film for one category, and that was screenplay, and they didn't even shortlist Spielberg for Best Director. So there were a lot of concerns about this film, and there's still people going back and forth online about, is it too sweet, too sentimental, or people really defending it, saying it's really about something else. It's about how people process things through filmmaking. And as I said in the previous video for Score, this is a movie that is in a position now where it's not likely to win any Oscar that it's nominated for. And it is something of a shame, because you can tell that Spielberg is really pouring his heart and soul into it, but for a lot of people, it's just not clicking. A lot of people have made the joke of, oh, Steven Spielberg would rather make a movie about his childhood other than go to therapy. Like, men will do anything than go to therapy. So, yeah, I think that this is a well-respected movie, and it might win an Oscar somewhere, might win an Oscar for Score, as I teased in the other video, but even though it won the Golden Globe, it didn't win anything else, and a lot of other guilds, like, didn't nominate it for a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, I just think the fact that this one is so clearly Oscar bait means that voters felt compelled to look elsewhere. Speaking of, third most likely to win is The Banshees of Inisherin. So this movie also won the Golden Globe for musical comedy, and there was a point in time when this was seriously looking like your alternate to win Best Picture. The movie was very well received by the Academy, getting 9 nominations, including nominations for editing and score, which really showcase the support that this movie has. And after it won the Golden Globe, I remember there was a lot of speculation about, ooh, if it wins SAG or if it wins BAFTA, then it could be a real threat to win. And it looked initially like it was dead set to win BAFTA, but then it lost. And that seemingly killed any chances of this film potentially upsetting in Best Picture. It's weird that both of the 2 Golden Globe winners don't seem to have a very real shot at winning anymore. And I don't know. The thing is, this is still a well-liked movie, but it is a cold movie. It's a movie that, like, doesn't leave you with any easy answers, and a lot of people have sort of talked about, like, ooh, feeling left cold by the film and not really being in the mood to award it. It's tricky because I don't know a lot of people that actively hate this movie. I don't know a lot of people that would rank it at the bottom of their ballots, and yet I don't think it has the love it needs to pull off a victory. I think people really like it, and I think it's going to be near the top of the contenders, but I just don't think it has the support it needs to actually win Best Picture. Second most likely to win is All Quiet on the Western Front. So this movie won BAFTA, which was a very, very big deal when it won. And the funny thing about this movie is, for a long time, it wasn't really considered an active part of the Best Picture race. It was pretty much only nominated in International Feature, and that was it. And it really wasn't until the combination of Oscar shortlist and BAFTA shortlist that we started to see real love for this movie emerge. And it's funny because Netflix initially wasn't sure what movie they should be pushing. When Bardo got bad responses, they sort of started focusing on Glass Onion, and they were kind of focusing on Pinocchio for a while. And the love for All Quiet manifested very out of nowhere without Netflix needing to do much campaigning. And it's kind of funny because Netflix has spent the last couple of years trying really, really hard to win Best Picture, and there's a chance that they could win Best Picture for this, for the movie they weren't even trying to campaign. And a part of me kind of wants to see that. It's a really, really good film, and much like Coda, it's in an interesting position of kind of peaking too late, kind of peaking after the point where it would normally peak. And so now it's one of the big awards contenders of the year, even though it didn't get nominated for any Critics' Choice Awards outside of the international feature, same with the Globes. And so there hasn't been a lot of eyes on it. It is peaking late. And yes, it hasn't really been nominated in a lot of places, but that means it hasn't lost places either. I think a lot of people who see the film are struck by how powerful it is and how haunting it is. And yet, I don't think this can actually win Best Picture. And believe it or not, I think the biggest factor against it isn't the lack of a director or editing nomination, because Coda showed that was possible. And it isn't the late-minute surge, because we saw that again with Coda. It isn't the international feature factor. It isn't even the Netflix factor. I think the biggest factor against this movie winning Best Picture is it's a really, really bleak movie. I know people that don't watch many Oscar movies like to joke about the Oscars rewarding really sad movies all the time, but this is really, really sad even for an Oscar movie, and it would feel weird. This would be like the saddest Best Picture winner since 12 Years a Slave. Most of the time, the Oscars tend to award feel-good movies that like leave you feeling uplifted and with like a newfound lust for life. And that is certainly not All Quiet. This is a movie that wants to make you really think about the brutality of war. And the fact that it is so bleak, I think, is its biggest downfall in winning Best Picture. And it's a movie that a lot of people really like. And I do think out of all the other 9 contenders that aren't the frontrunner, this is the only one that I can really see an upset happening for. And yet, I'm not going to predict it. The film that I am going to predict, number 1, going to win Best Picture, is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Oh man, it feels so good to say these words. This movie has been on quite the journey. I will never forget when this movie initially premiered, and there was so much love and so much passion, and I remember people saying, but it's probably too weird for the Oscars. Like, this would be lucky to get a lone screenplay nomination. And fast forward to today, it has 11 Academy Award nominations, more than any other film this year, and it's potentially poised, if it wins the amount of awards I'm currently predicting it to win, it will be the biggest haul for a Best Picture winner since Slumdog Millionaire. And yes, this is a weird movie, but it's a movie that has so much to say, and so many people are finding something new, some new angle to look at the film on. And the funny thing is, when I saw this movie in the theater a year ago, as someone who's on the autistic spectrum, the sensory overload of the film was a little bit too much for me, and at a certain point I stopped being able to follow the plot. And I remember walking out of this movie being like, feeling so bad that I didn't have the same love as everyone else on film Twitter seemed to have. And then months went by, and I listened to other podcasts about it, and I listened to people reviewing it and analyzing the film, and eventually I went back and I started to be able to see the film in a different light. As I'm recording this, I've seen the film 3 times now, and I felt the urge to go back and revisit it, because it's a movie that gets better and better each time you watch it, and there's so many different things to unpack. And the fact that the movie premiered in March, I think, is actually a benefit to it, because anyone like me that wasn't sure at first had time to really let the film sit with them, and no one's forgetting this film. This movie will stay with you. And I think it's going to stand the test of time as a truly great Best Picture winner. Partially because it's the exact opposite of Oscar bait. Like, I'm sure that when Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert were making this film, it never even crossed their mind that this could get nominated for Best Picture, much less win. And because it's so the opposite of Oscar bait, it's felt like an underdog all season long, even though it's really not. And you look at what it's won recently, the combination of PGA, SAG, DGA, WGA, ACE, the guilds are all going for it, not to mention what happened at Critics' Choice and what happened at Indie Spirits. Like, this movie has apparently set the record for most wins for a movie, a record that Return of the King has held on to for a really, really long time. And look, I understand that not everybody is going to love this movie. It is weird. It is doing things in a different way. And yet, for the people that love this movie, they really, really love it. A lot of people are describing that this is, as soon as they saw it in the theater, it immediately became their new favorite movie of all time. And this one, I really think, is going to stand the test of time. And if you look at everything it's won, I don't think anything else is going to stand a chance. I think this is a clear, clear victory for Everything Everywhere, and it's going to be quite the sight to behold. So thank you very much for watching. I don't know if I'm going to do a video breaking down the Oscar winners. Last year I didn't. It really is going to depend on how many surprises there are on Oscar night. And at some point soon, probably sooner than you think, I'm going to make a video of breaking down the early Oscar contenders for next year. So, thank you very much for staying with me, and I will see you when I see you. Take care.